Tonight, we're going to have as our featured speaker Mr. Ed Silva, who is Director of Building and Capital Projects for the village. He's going to be reviewing with us some, I think, pretty exciting plans about the future of downtown Palmetto Bay. Now, some of you have some idea what that means. Others of you may be sitting there saying, what the heck is he talking about? Well, that's why Ed is here. It's going to be a radical change in our community. It isn't going to happen overnight, and Ed will explain how that's going to play out over time, but it's the future. It's where we're going, and to a certain degree, how we're going to get there. So I think you'll find Ed's discussion tonight very enlightening. We will have a presentation first, and then Q&A time afterwards. So feel free to store up your questions, and when Ed opens it up, he'll do the best he can to answer anything that you can throw at him. I've heard his presentation before. He's very polished at giving it, although he doesn't think so. But I think he's going to answer most of your questions in the presentation as it is. A little background about Ed. He is Miami raised. He was Miami Norland Senior High School and University of Miami, so he's a homeboy. He's had a significant amount of private sector experience in the Miami area. He's an award-winning architect for over 20 years. So what you're going to hear tonight comes from a voice of experience, somebody who knows the business, knows what's going on. He's got creds in this area. He's owner of an award-winning architectural firm, still here in Miami, recipient of over 200 FAME awards for architectural design. Clients include Lennar, Standard Pacific Homes, South Kendall Construction, on and on and on. So he's done a lot of work for a lot of good companies here in our area. He was a vice president for HG Enterprises for a number of years, from 86 to 92. He's got a number of certifications, again, to enhance his credibility here. He's a certified building official, a registered architect, a residential contractor, and a certified plans examiner. His public sector experience, which of course is where he resides at the moment, he was with the village of Pinecrest as a building plan reviewer and building inspector from 2003 to 2007, and since 2007 he's been the director of building and capital projects for the village of Palmetto Bay. Since he's been with Palmetto Bay, his accomplishments include some of his accomplishments. There's a pretty good list of them here, but he's implemented, and this was a very important one, I think, especially for people who go through the permitting process in Palmetto Bay, has implemented the transition of the building department from an outsourced agency to an in-house customer-friendly department, which has, I think, substantially improved customer service and satisfaction for the residents of Palmetto Bay. Anybody that's been through the permitting process under Ed's tenure can testify to the fact that things are a lot better than they used to be. Reduced permit review time substantially. He's managed numerous construction jobs for the village, including, and there's another long list of things, but some of the ones that may spring to mind: the Palmetto Bay Library and Community Center, the Coral Reef Concession Stand, the first LEED LEED certified municipal building in Miami-Dade County. Palmetto Bay, at least partially under Ed's leadership, is one of the most environmentally conscious municipalities, I think, in the county, perhaps even in the state. So the concession building there, the Palmetto Bay Municipal Building, out on the highway, I'm sure you've all seen that. That's the first platinum LEED certified city hall in the whole state of Florida. So he's done work on Coral Reef Park, on Falada Estate, and a whole long list of other projects here in the village. To date, all projects have been completed on time, and numerous other projects have been improved improved the quality of life in our village. Most recently, he has established a task force to study the redevelopment of the downtown corridor. He'll explain what that means. The downtown corridor in Palmetto Bay, with over 40 members, making it the biggest task force ever established in the village of Palmetto Bay. And this is what we're here to talk about tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Ed Silva.
Switch on the mic.
Hi.
you. Good evening. My name is Ed Silva, and I want to thank Chet England for the presentation. Sorry it was a little bit long there, guys. With that, I want to start straight onto the video presentation. It's about a 15-20 minute presentation, and I hope it'll answer a lot of the questions that you all may have. And I also have a couple of people from the task force that are going to be saying a few words as well. This is the presentation to the Palmetto Bay Village Voice of our proposed downtown redevelopment, and we have to begin somewhere. With that said, we have to envision and communicate to groups like this. This is our communication is key. This is our third presentation. We've gone to the Palmetto Bay Business Association, to Manglewood, and now we're here at the Palmetto Bay Village Voice. But we're not done. Any interested group that wants us to meet with them, we'll be more than glad to meet with anybody. At the end of the day, one of the things that Chet didn't say is I'm a resident. I live here. I've lived here since 1998. This is my village as well as everybody else's, and this is what we envision the future to be. It's not staff, it's not us, it's all of us collectively. So the first thing, our vision statement is to create a vibrant and inviting live, work, play downtown for Palmetto Bay. By a show of hands, how many people know where downtown Palmetto Bay is? Out of the ones that have their hands up, how many of you shopped there in the last 6 months? 1, 2. So would you all agree that the downtown is a stagnant or a declining area?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, it has. In fact, the property values in our downtown has dropped over 5% in the last year. I'm going to show a very quick video. This is a preview of the state of the village, and then I'll keep on going with the presentation.
It's never easy to pioneer. With it comes risk and doubt and debate. But what if there's a chance at great success? A chance of transformation?
We've been having this discussion for a few years. I don't think there is a downtown Palmetto Bay. That's the problem. When somebody says, meet me in Coconut Grove, you visualize something. Saying, meet me in South Miami, you think Red and Sunset. When they say, meet me in Palmetto Bay, you don't know where to go.
I can't describe what doesn't exist. Okay, so I don't really think we have a downtown.
So I guess the possibility for a downtown exists, but there is nothing there now. It's an area, I would say, from a planning perspective, with a lot of potential. It's underdeveloped. It's ripe for redevelopment and economic development.
This village has done a really good job of ensuring that we are the village of parks and we have great amenities for our residents. Ensure that our streets and our landscaping and our residential communities look great. And now we're starting to embark on our third leg of the tripod, which is to ensure that we have a vibrant downtown area.
We have a beautiful park system, we have a beautiful village throughout our community, but the commercial sector has been lagging behind and we're going to catch up.
The area envisioned to be the village of Palmetto Bay's new downtown is known as the Franjo Triangle and Island, or FT&I District. Its southern boundary is 184th Street and goes north to 168th Street. From Franjo Road to the east to the southbound lanes of US 1 to the west.
It's really centrally located, so it's got access from everywhere. It can be a regional activity center. And this downtown's got to play multiple roles. It's on a road that is, again, a regional transportation corridor, not only from a roadway perspective, but it's from a transit perspective.
The Florida Turnpike is just minutes away, and the busway that feeds the Miami-Dade Metro Rail system is less than a quarter mile from the area.
That's a little section. Sorry about that. That's a little section of what the state of the village is. You all can come back in a month and see the rest of it. It's that's actually a very good video, and it actually describes what we're doing in terms of our downtown in a great way. The reason why I put that in there is because it kind of describes what the downtown area is. And it's actually a little bit further than that. That's the area that's within Palmetto Bay. And it's true, there's nothing there right now. We all have to kind of try to believe in the dream, believe in the vision that we're going toward. Just like they've done in many other places in Miami. Who would have thought South Beach in the late 80s, early 90s would have been anything else other than what it was, who would have thought that Wynwood would have turned around the way it did in the last 5-6 years, Mike? So start somewhere, and we start by planning what we envision in the future. And this is not a short-term play. It's not a 4 or 5 year play. It's a long-term goal, and it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of dedication by all of us if that's what it is what we want. So this is an initial rough model that we kind of did in-house in terms of the task force. What you see there is 3 different areas. One of the areas, the ones in white, is the immediate area that we're looking at. The gray is the second area, and then the third is an area that we're looking at and we're having to study right now as well. That's an area that's west of US 1 southbound and straddling the busway on both sides. It's not part of Palmetto Bay, but we're not working in a vision. We have to look at this globally, because if we don't look at that area, we're fooling ourselves. They're all going to work together. So the task force was initially established May 1st, 2013 with 32 members. We're currently over 40, and we'll take as many members as want to go to these meetings. The village has earmarked $2.8 million for the first initial steps. Out of the $2.8 million, $1.8 million of it is transportation-related special revenue funds. It can only be used for infrastructure. We have proposed a potential area for a higher educational campus, because that's an activity node that would bring people to a downtown area. We're proposing and looking at a major transit hub. We want to create a dining and entertainment district. This is going to provide economic stability for the future, but I've been hitting on the economic stability for the future because we've been actually going through budget season. This is really a quality of life issue. This is the way we want to live, and this is the way we want to enjoy our area and our downtown area. Additionally, we're trying to protect the existing neighborhoods from commercial encroachment. If you look at the green area here, we're proposing, and all these are just recommendation, guys, but this is what the task force is looking at right now. We're proposing a linear green belt that's going to serve as a buffer from the existing residential from what's higher intense use, which is what the downtown area would be like. And we're also going to review all the current zoning regulations to improve our business development. We pretty much are business closed right now. We want to turn that around. We want to be business friendly. We want to enjoy everybody to come in and do work and develop in Palmetto Bay. We do have to go and talk a little bit about our finances, and I got 2 or 3 slides on this, and I'll try to go through them quickly. But right now, if we continue to stay with our revenues, which are relatively flat, and if we don't do anything to increase them, we do have a tipping point where our expenses are more than our revenues 6 or 8 years down the road. But the green one that goes up to about $18 million, that's our expenditure lines. That's a projected line considering us to stay at the same level of service that we have right now. It's not adding services, it's not doing anything other than just projecting what we have right now currently out into the future. The one below it is our revenue projections. And that's based on, I think it's based on 2% growth on a yearly basis. Obviously, this isn't what's going to happen. This is a projection to stay where we're at and with what's coming in. Management's not going to allow that to happen. We'll look at it, but our way to react to it, it's limited. So expenses will increase to maintain current service levels, or we need to reduce expenses by reducing services. I, as a resident, I don't believe that any other resident here would like to see any of our services reduced. So how do we get our revenues? That's a question that not too many people understand. We get our revenues ad valorem, which is our taxes, make up 39% of that pie. Local taxes and intergovernmental are based on a prorated share, which is based on the overall population of the village in comparison to everybody else in Miami-Dade County. Whatever our percentage is, it's the percentage that we get from them as well. A couple other things that we need to address. Current zoning for the FT&I area allows for 3,200 units. The underlying zoning for the county in the same general area, their master plans call for 17,000 units. We're not going to propose a growth from our numbers, a radical departure from our numbers. Right now, we also allow for 6.5 million square feet of commercial development in our FT&I district. Why are we doing this? Our ad valorem for our downtown right now is $1.1 million. It was a 5% drop last year, which actually made our revenues drop from our taxes by 0.62% for the whole village. The village of Pinecrest last year had $28.3 million in new construction. The city of South Miami had 17.4. The town of Cutler Bay had 16.7. Florida City, the southernmost city in our county, had 4 million. We had 2.3. Something's wrong. There's a reason why we're not developing. It's not that we're the hole in the donut. It's just that we've just been absolutely bypassed by everybody for reasons. Now, does anybody in this room want a reduction of services? I don't, it's... What millage rate does everybody in this room consider to be too high? Right now we're at 2.447. We're what, the third or the fourth lowest in the county? The fifth lowest. To augment and to keep our level of services, does anybody here think that we should be paying more taxes? I didn't think I would get anybody to raise their hands. So what revenue sources can be grown? As a village, we're limited. It's our tax base, it's our share of a pie of sales taxes, our CITT, our gas taxes. This is the only place that we have that we can even attempt to try to grow this going out into the future. Our residential base is right now 97% built out. There's not a whole lot of growth in our residential sector at all. And lastly, what kind of a village do we all want to live in? We did a little bit of a internal thing, and we're actually doing even more studies right now, but in a comparison of tax revenue, the first 2 to 3 blocks off 184th Street on the east and west side of Frangio right now brings the village $19,600 in ad valorem taxes. Multi-use, multi-family, mixed-use projects would bring us almost $1.5 million in tax revenue. That's more than we collect now for our whole commercial side. That's the equivalent of 25% of all the ad valorem taxes that we bring in for the village at the present time. So without planning, as the picture's doing, everything gets hazy. We lose our compass, we have nowhere to go. But with proper planning, our vision comes into focus, and our vision for the future leads to a better quality of life. So why are we doing this? Why are we trying to develop and get a downtown going? Well, we want to revive the downtown. Better accurately said, we want to create a downtown. We want to create a place where we all can go to. We want to provide opportunities for the small businesses to succeed in their local communities. We want to increase our tax revenues from mixed-use developments rather than raising the millage rate and raising our tax revenues on the backs of us, the residents of Palmetto Bay. We want to manage the growth and make sure that the growth is in the right places and it's envisioned and it's done in the way that we want it to be. We want to improve our quality of life, and we want to protect our neighborhoods. We want to ensure that we don't have any commercial growth that ever goes into our residential areas. The bigger question is, why not? Why not improve our living environment? Why not provide a livable, walkable environment? Why not provide alternate living and shopping environments, provide alternate transportation modes, and help government and utilize government to help jumpstart revitalization? It's got to start with somebody. It's got to start with the government. We're here to do certain parts of it, and then the heavy lifting will be done by the residential developers, the commercial developers, and so on and so forth. Right now, for downtown development, planning by the typical zoning and coding regulations equals failure. In reality, the way zoning codes are written right now, they try to segregate uses. That's not the way we need to look at it. By segregating uses, you get, and this is obviously facetious, but you get a representation of a US 1 with a whole lot of signs and a whole lot of places that are just geared for the car. We also have to make sure that we get this message out. We don't want a NIMBY dome placed in Palmetto Bay. We're not trying to put a moat around Palmetto Bay and keep everybody out. We have to be inviting. We have to bring in other commercial sectors, other residential components, and make sure that the NIMBY dome isn't put over Palmetto Bay, because in reality that's a recipe for disaster down the road. So I'm going to ask a couple of quizzes because this is important. Out of these 4, you all can just answer yourself and then you see the answer, but out of these 4, which one do you think has the highest density? By a show of hands, how many of you all think it's A? B? Oh, I'm not going to get a whole lot of help here. C or D? The answer is B. That's 28 units per acre. The other ones are 24, 19, and 16. Another little test. Out of these 4, you all can answer for yourselves, but which one do you believe has got the highest density? The answer in this one is A, at 85 units to an acre. The other ones are 76, A, and 81s. The point of this is very simple. Density is not the enemy. Bad design, bad architecture is the enemy. Handled correctly, designed properly with the correct regulations, we can handle the density. We can take care of it. We can take care of that. We can take care of our traffic components as well. Like I said a little while ago, the truth of the matter, this is about the quality of life that we as residents will be using here and living here in Palmetto Bay. What does quality of life mean to you and to all of us? Oops. Well, sorry, that slide's not working very well. Quality of life, as a task force, we're looking at the quality of life to mean linear parks, residential units, because without a residential component, you don't really have a vibrant downtown. Outdoor dining. Right now, most of us go to different places around town to go eat dinner at night or on the weekends. I can't imagine that very many of us have really gone to eat anywhere near our downtown area in the last 10 years. There is nowhere to go. Most of us have to travel either to South Miami, Pinecrest, Mary Brickell Village, Midtown, or even the beach, but not here. We need to have retail choices. We need to have a place that we can go and stroll at night, and as a community be able to reconnect with our neighbors in an environment that's pedestrian friendly. And we have to improve our streetscapes. Our streets are outside living rooms. That's our property. As a government, as residents, we own those streets. That's our living areas. This is where our investment as a government needs to be. So what is a complete street design? A complete street design is where the pedestrian, the car, the mass transit, and the bicyclist all have equal rights. In the 50s and the 60s, most zoning codes were made, and most traffic engineers considered the roads to be a way to get you from point A to point B as quickly as possible. It failed to take into account what the pedestrians are and the bicyclists are, and we need to kind of put that back into you're trying to rush me up here. Again, back to the downtown. The task force has identified 3 priority areas. One is where Perrine Avenue and 174th Street is. The second is the intersection of Franjo and US 1. And the third is Hibiscus Street all the way north on Franjo. We're going to create interest from the private developers by redesigning street patterns. We'll take a street that looks like this, add some landscaping, some infrastructure, some street lights, and then we'll allow the private developers to come in with the proper zoning and the proper incentives, and they'll build in their buildings. They'll be doing the heavy lifting. Our identified priorities are 4. As I said, one's Perrine Avenue, 174th, one's Franjo and US 1 northbound, one's Franjo and Hibiscus, and we're also looking at a civic plaza at a park at Franjo and 181st Street. Out of these 4, these 3 are funded, and that's where we're going to begin. And hopefully we'll be making recommendations to the council as we go forward. Again, our funding allocation is $2.8 million, of which $1.2 is budgeted for street improvements in the Franjo area, $624 for traffic calming, and there was $1 million that we got through the budget process to be able to use in our downtown. So the additions to details and special events is also something that needs to be done in our downtown. We need to promote it. We need to make sure that people come to our downtown. Our task force, as you heard in the video earlier, is comprised of 4 groups: funding and finance, marketing, planning and architecture, and traffic and infrastructure. We have one gentleman on our task force that works for Miami-Dade County. He says it's the first time that he's ever seen a task force that's absolutely looking at all the components. We have a lot of experience in that task force. We have architects, we have planners, we have marketing experts, we have bankers, we have civil engineers, we have business owners, we have real estate agents. We're trying to have as many people as we possibly can, in addition to our complete, all our directors are part of the task force as well. It's a Herculean task. The people that are in the room that are in the task force understand how many meetings we're having and how often we meet and how often we're trying to get something accomplished here. It's time that we have looked at this area. But one of the things that we're looking at in terms of marketing is that we need to ensure that we have as many special events as we possibly can. And contrary to popular belief, that's not a bust of Eugene Flint. But we need to make sure that we have as many special events as we possibly can have, because we need to bring people out there. We've been looking at antique car shows, outdoor concerts, a farmer's market, art fairs, Easter parades, food festivals, nighttime activities, parades, Halloween, strawberry festivals, and the list goes on and on and on. Now the reason for this is, if you're a business owner and you're in the downtown area, you want to make sure that you're going to have the traffic there that's going to be able to go to your stores. If you're a restaurateur, you want to make sure that you have the foot traffic that you need to make sure that people are going to be going by your restaurant and remembering that it's there. That's what our role is. We need to have the special events, and we also need to make sure that our streets are done in a proper way to make it inviting and to let everybody know that we mean business. What are some of the local economic factors that affect Palmetto Bay? Right here in Palmetto Bay Village Center, they have just brought in Bupa, which is an insurance company that's going to have 500 employees. That brings the total amount of employees in this building to over 1,000. They'll be expanding this place. It's not just going to stand still. They had a major charrette that allows for some major expansion, and that will be coming in the near future. Additionally, Miami Children's Hospital, which is in the heart of our downtown Palmetto Bay, will be expanding as well. They're looking at an expansion that is going to bring over 120 direct jobs into our downtown. But what are some of the regional economic factors? I don't know how many of y'all read in the Miami Herald, I think it was 2 weekends ago, that there is a cone of silence right now, but 20th Century Fox is looking at building an amusement park and a water park at Miami Metro Zoo. They're projecting that it's going to bring over 5,000 jobs by the year 2020. Over 3 million annual visitors. Their main entry will be on Southwest 168th Street, which is less than 2 miles away from our downtown. And the nearest mass transit station is in Palmetto Bay. Those 5,000 people are going to be looking for a place to go eat, shop, and live. And they want to live near work. So the timing is right, even with this. But there's some other regional economic factors. We're looking at a proposed transit station, and we're trying to see how we can bring that to downtown Palmetto Bay. Transit-oriented designs can increase ridership by 30%. It promotes pedestrian-friendly design. It has a mix of uses. It discourages the car usage, and it provides connectivity throughout the county. The second highest household expense is transportation. By giving them this, we're going to give our residents a way to reduce those expenses. An average commute for a Palmetto Bay resident is 40 minutes to and from work each way. Proximity to a transit station has a real positive documented effect on real estate values. And lastly, the urban patterns of the future are dependent on the decisions that we make today. What you see out there was studied. Zoning codes were written 60, 70 years ago. And what you have out there right now is the fruits of those labors. We have a real chance here as a village, as neighbors, to try to figure out what it is that we want our downtown to look like. And this is not just something that we're dreaming. It's been done in numerous places. I usually like to have at least one example at every one of these meetings. This one's going to be City Place. City Place in the mid-1990s, which is in West Palm Beach, had an 80% vacancy rate. It was crime-ridden, drug-infested, and the city of West Palm Beach was facing bankruptcy. They took a gamble, and they gambled on their downtown because they had a vision, they had a strong mayor, and they wanted to go for it, and they thought that they could be successful. 10 years later, it's got a very high occupancy rate. Their bond capacity has gone through the roof. They had a revenue surplus, and City Place became a tourist destination. That's been repeated over and over and over in South Florida. Now, these are some conceptual renderings of what we envision at the present time, and nothing is cast in stone. Everything can change, and everything's up for debate. But that's a view of Franger Road from 184th Street looking northbound. That's the Franger Road Park with an amphitheater and the buildings around it. This is Perrine Avenue, and this is Perrine Avenue with some sort of festival going on. Lastly, a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. That's a quote by Winston Churchill. I'm asking all of you to believe, and I'm asking all of you to think about the future and think about where we're going. Simple to say it's not going to work. Simple to sit there and say, oh, but this is the pratfalls, this is what's going to happen. We need to plan for it. We need to be out in the forefront, and as a community come together and figure out where we want to go. And what we're saying is, this is a long-term plan with short, intermediate, and long-term goals. Planning is key. Unlocking regulatory roadblocks is essential. With that, we're looking at this kind of backwards. We're looking at at this from a developer's point of view. Because one of the questions that we get asked often is why hasn't FT&I worked? FT&I hasn't worked because, like every other charrette, the majority of charrettes, they usually end up in somebody's drawers. It's looked at from a conceptual point of view. It's looked at from a pretty picture point of view. We've turned that around. We're trying to look at these areas, figure out what the basic land cost is, and if that number is attractive to a developer, you better believe they'll come into town, because at the end of the day, they're looking at their final numbers. What they want to do is come into an area and ensure that they're going to make a profit, and what we're trying to do is ensure that they will make that profit, but on our terms, on the way we want it, on the way we envision our downtown to look. The effort needs a buy-in amongst all of the residents of the village. This is about the future, and this is not about the immediate political issues. We actually stand here with a council that for one of the very few times are all in favor of this. So that's in and of itself a rarity. We have the council support. This process has worked in many other areas. We will have studies of all kinds to guide our task force. We're not, although we're mostly all professionals, we're not doing this in a vacuum. We're going to have feasibility studies, tax studies, marketing studies, traffic engineering studies, and even market absorption studies, because we want to ensure that what we put out there and what we recommend to the council has all the studies possible to ensure that this is going to be a success. And we ask for your support and your involvement. At the end, the village is at a crossroads, and we need to define what lifestyle we prefer. If we want to see our millage rates increase to continue to have the level of service we have, we can't be the NIMBYs and not have this in our backyards. If we want to have a downtown where we can go as a community and you can go have dinner and see your neighbors and be able to go for a stroll down a downtown street and go shopping and go to art festivals and go to all these kind of events that we can envision for a downtown, then we need to get behind this. This is namely about the quality of life, but it also helps us with our financial security. We ask you to help us open the doors to the future, and with that, if you have any questions, I'll be more than glad to take them. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I do want to have a couple of people get up and talk. Did David Sisman leave? Yeah. He left? So much for that. All right, questions?
If you have a question, please raise your hand so I can get the microphone. It'll help us record.
I congratulate you on starting this process. What I would love to see, though, is an example where a redevelopment of this type has been successful with basically 2 high-speed roadways running through the middle of it.
Delray Beach?
I would suggest then that you add that to your presentation.
We have.
Because quite honestly, I've been seeing US 1 going down there through, it's basically 2 highways. I have a problem seeing that turned into a walkable space.
In Delray Beach and, you know, it's a Singletary. Salisbury. I always get your name.
That's it.
I'll be more than glad to show it to you, but in Delray Beach, believe it or not, they have their residential units 10 feet away from you. They're US 1. It's a divided road, extremely similar to what we have here in Palmetto Bay, and it's been a very successful area. They've had a revitalization that's been ongoing for about 5-7 years now, and it's actually come along quite nicely. It's actually one of the presentations that I've actually shown to the task force.
That's really my big concern.
In addition with that, we've also looked, because one of our concerns is US 1 as well. One of the reasons why we're trying to look at both sides of Franjo is because we're trying to figure out a way to slow traffic. For you to have a walkable pedestrian downtown, the maximum speed you should have is around 30 to 35 miles an hour. Nobody does that on US 1 unless you're stuck in traffic in rush hour. By putting a couple of lights, by doing a couple of crossovers, which are some of the things that we've been looking at, you can help. That will help you get from one side to another. We understand that that's one of the concerns that we're looking at, and to answer your question, Delray Beach is one of the places that's been able to successfully navigate that.
Nice presentation, Ed. I'm a member of the task force. One of my partners, one of my businesses, Scott Silver, and I've developed a number of projects. You're sitting in one, and as Ed said, we're not done yet. We actually also have been advisors to a number of businesses and a number of communities on their downtown developments. And every time we come back to Palmetto Bay, we say, what about Palmetto Bay? Now the good news is we can learn from those failures and those successes in those communities for that. But we're really excited about this. I travel across the state and I see other communities doing this, and it really does revitalize everything that's going on. Ed put a great committee together, task force, I'm sorry. use the wrong word there, task force together, and I really think that under his leadership, this is going to be a great success for us, and we can't wait till it gets started.
Thank you, but I'm only as good as the task force members, and I have a very good group. I will tell you that I have a lot of people from the different sides of the political spectrum. It's been an absolute pleasure seeing everybody being able to get behind a common goal, and this is for the future of our village, and this is about quality of life and where we're going to. Any other questions?
And what do you see for the time frame for all of this? I mean, it's obviously not next week or next year, but how far out are we having to look here?
Well, there's some people that think that this is going to happen overnight, and that's an absolute impossibility. This is a long-term goal. Like that picture showed, we have different phases. We have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. We're looking at areas that are not even part of our village, that as a village we need to understand, and we need to try to figure out if that's something that we want to be able to control or not. There are some developments that are coming, and some of the developments that are coming is Miami Children's Hospital eventually will be coming on board. There's a 5-acre piece of 5-acre parcel across the street from us that's going to be looking at it. We've had a bunch of developers come to us and ask us, what are you all doing? We want to invest in your village. But we have a long ways to go. We need to look at our zoning codes and remove all the regulatory roadblocks that we have in our own ordinances to ensure that the developer can come in here and understand the rules and understand what he needs to do to make a successful project. I can't give you a timeline, Chad. It's impossible. I mean, I wish it could be over in one day. I wish it could be done in a year. But this is a long-term play. Once you start down this road, you just got to keep at it and be diligent at it.
Well, some of the things that you've said in some of these other areas, you've talked about significant progress in like a 5-year span. You know, to me, what I'm seeing here versus what you see when you go out on the roads now, it looks like it's probably more than 5. But I mean, are we looking at 10, 20?
And longer.
And, well, yeah.
Well, it's broke up into several different segments. The infrastructure and roads that are actually going to be started and initiated as we've identified the 3 areas. We're going to start 6 months.
6 months to a year.
My fingers crossed. And hopefully by next year, right around this time, you'll see a significant road improvement in a lot of these areas, which we're hoping will kind of start the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to see progress,
yes,
to continue. I mean, especially if this really is going to be a fairly long-term process, to keep people engaged, to keep people interested and supportive for the development that needs to be done. They've got to be able to see some things at some points in time.
Well, like I said before, we have $2.8 million of the Village of Palmetto Bay is going to be used in traffic and infrastructure improvements. That'll be the first initial steps from government to show people that we mean business. It's up to the private developer to come in afterwards, but will they come in once we remove a lot of the regulatory roadblocks and once we put our vision completely together? Absolutely. I've had numerous conversations with developers that are very much interested. In fact, there's one in here that's actually looking for some of that area. Somebody just came in that I would like to be able to have him talk for a couple of minutes. Joe? Joe Corradino is a planner. He's also a councilman for the Village of Pinecrest. I'd like to have him say a few words about what he thinks about the process of what we're doing right now.
Thank you. Ed asked me to come tonight because I've got some experience having gone through these processes before for about 20 years. I've been watching this process unfold, and I think it's really critical that it does so. I can give you an example of one place that had done it before that it worked out remarkably well. In the 1990s, the city of Miami Beach was coming out of a pretty dark economic time. If you'd gone out to the city of Miami Beach in the 1980s, mid-80s, you've been greeted with an older population that was leaving through attrition, decrepit buildings that had lost, had really approached the end of their useful lives. You would have been met by no activity on the streets except prostitutes and drug dealers. And essentially the city closed. When the sun went down, they rolled up the sidewalks and everybody got the hell out of Miami Beach. And it's 100% different than the city of Miami Beach functions and looks like today. because when they were going through that dark period, they decided to go through a process very, very similar to the one that's been initiated here in Palmetto Bay. Granted, a much grander scale, but no different of a process. And what they did was decided to look at their infrastructure, their critical infrastructure, in the four main ways. They looked at urban design. They looked at their urban design code, their zoning code. They looked at their transportation infrastructure. They looked at their drainage, and they looked at their water and sewer. And they did these types of studies that were both technical and public engagement studies, consensus building. And they put together master plans for each of those four types of infrastructure. And they really sold those to the community. The result of their sale to the community is they actually went to their own citizens and raised, citizens voted on over $97 million in general obligation bonds. And they then proceeded to upgrade that infrastructure. This is 2 decades before Miami-Dade County has touched. Miami-Dade County hasn't touched their underground infrastructure in 7 decades. I mean, a decade of progress has gone by. We've never fixed it. We've never wanted to raise taxes. We've never wanted to go out for the general obligation bond. Now we've got $1 billion worth of improvements, and basically the system is being duct taped together as we speak. And the fact is they raised the taxes. They went over that, and now it's close to 20-something years through the process. They're still not done, but they were able to track the development that they wanted, not the development that wanted them. And the point of that is that development in the state of Florida is really competitive. And everybody's got sunshine, everybody's got beaches. In South Dade, everybody's got the US 1 corridor. There are nodes of projected intensity in various states of disrepair or redevelopment. And the development community wants to be attracted to a place, has a couple of things that they want. First, primarily they want to make money. And the way to make money is to not have to contribute to the underground infrastructure, or not have to contribute as much to those pieces of infrastructure. They also like public commitment, where the government and the citizens have stood behind a process to redevelop a place. They say, okay, this is a stable, secure community that we can invest our money in. They also like predictability. Again, with the land use codes and the zoning codes and the political processes, they want to see that the government's behind us, that the applications are handled in a predictable way. When we start and then all this infrastructure costs money. I mean, it's extraordinarily expensive to start to rebuild roads. It's extraordinarily expensive to rebuild underground infrastructure and drainage. And it has to be done in a phased approach. You can't rebuild the road and then rip it up and put down the underground infrastructure. So you have to start to do these things in logical, sequential manners. All finished off with the urban design, which is your zoning code. And if you were to go out there and build to your zoning code today, you may not be really excited. That's what you're going to see in the long run, is what the buildings look like. You may not be excited what comes out of the ground. The zoning code is old. It predates our incorporation, and it's probably mainly from a different style of development than we would develop today. So the urban planners would come in, look at this code, and maybe do some subtle changes. Maybe the volume of the buildings are not substantially different than what's projected on US 1, but maybe they're in a different form. They're closer to the street. You can have architectural design guidelines. So either way, the talk on Miami Beach at the time in the early 90s was, hey guys, we don't have to take every developer that comes down the pike. I mean, they were desperate for development, but because their city was in deep trouble, but early on they were taking every developer that came through. The issue was, no, let's organize, let's get the codes together, let's get the plans together, and then we'll have so much development trying to come to us that we will be able to be selective. And that's what they are. Miami Beach developed the way Miami Beach wanted to develop. So many communities in Dade, in Florida, develop because the guys come, he's got a project, oh, let's take it. But nobody wants to develop here, and that's what the developer will tell. Nobody's knocking down the door to develop in this community. We need to respect ourselves more. We need to put together our processes in detail, and we need to then make sure as the development comes back that we are selecting the development we want. Another thing is that these processes are extremely difficult to pull off. If we don't have consensus from the community, it'll fail because it politically will become impossible to do. Nobody's going to tax themselves to do it. Nobody's going to support the changes. People are scared to change. Palmetto Bay is one of the only communities that's even attempting this type of process right now. And so the other guys are behind. The other guys will have to develop to the codes that they have. They haven't done infrastructure projects. If Palmetto Bay even can pull this off, the development, we're going to be years ahead of our neighboring cities, which is a very, very positive thing. To that extent, it is a long-term proposition. I mean, again, it costs money. But look, Dadeland developed in literally 10 years. It popped right out of the ground. It has to do with economics as well. So I think that we should stick with this process. I think that we should get it done. Ultimately, if what we're doing to plan it isn't very expensive compared to what it costs to build it. And ultimately, it should have wide-reaching economic benefits for us as a community. And we'll be like, but look, the US 1 corridor is going to develop in nodes as growth comes. Again, growth was scary in the last decade. It was scary because we weren't managing it very well. We were managing it off of old codes and bad plans. It doesn't have to be that way once you replan your community. It can happen on your terms, and we won't be faced with the deterioration of the quality of life that we faced in the last decade. Terrible schools, terrible roads, terrible traffic, developers that came in and took advantage of the community because we're ill-prepared. We will be extremely well-prepared, and development will happen on our terms, and we'll be better off for it. So that's my experience. I've been doing it for 20 years, and if y'all have any questions, I'd be glad to engage in that.
Thank you, Joe. Is there any other questions? Mr. England.
Political consensus. Right now we have a council that appears to be very supportive of this process, but as you know, in this village for some time there have been some fairly significant political divisions in what people consider to be quality of life issues. This is going to be part of the task force brief, I think, it's in your subcommittees and so forth, but what kind of a approach do you view there will be necessary there to build consensus across the village?
Want me to answer that?
By all means. Sandy Stanchik.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, if anybody doesn't know me by now, my name is Stanley Stanchik. My wife is the mayor. We have our disagreements after 40 years of marriage. This is not one of them. Just to give you a little history and background, I used to work for Joe. Thank you, Joe, I appreciate it. I'm graduated from UN in architecture. I have a master in science in urban and regional planning. I've been doing this for 35 years. I'm old. Let me lean against the wall, hold the building up. You talked about the political climate. Let me address that very directly. There have been disagreements in the council over a lot of things. This is not one of them. We've met privately. They come to when I say meet privately, please don't take that as I take it into the closet and meet them. That's not what happens. They come to our task force meetings. Mr. Dubois has been there. Tim Schaefer's been there. Patrick's been there. Patrick's a good friend of mine, believe it or not, with all the politics that are going on. My wife, obviously, then Joan. We have literally convinced most of the council, Mr. Dubois is one of the negative ones, and I'll explain why in a minute, that this has an incredible benefit from a quality of life, from a financial point of view, and developments. And let me tell you what Mr. Dubois' comment to me was. Mr. Dubois, sorry, I mispronounced his name. We just call him David. Said to me very nicely, I'm a developer. I'm not coming in here unless I get an ROI. Anybody know what that means besides David Singer?
Return on investment.
Return on investment. I sat there for, half hour? And I explained to David what an ROI from a government point of view would be. Mr. Singer may not agree, but here's what we presented to him. We have assets as a government and as a private developer. The assets for the government happen to be road, infrastructure, sidewalks, lighting, crosswalks, you name it, anything that has to do with infrastructure. That's our asset. We
We can either watch it deteriorate, and if any of you have been up and down Frangel Road, you know how it's deteriorating. Or we can improve it, we can make something out of it, and we can attract private development with that investment. Ed presented a slide that we worked very hard on, and basically it says 19 homes?
That area is
About 30 homes in the first 3 blocks of Frangel Road contribute $19,000 in taxes. With a mixed-use development, and I'll call it high density if you want that, because at 50 unit density really doesn't impact what we're doing. We make $1.5 million in taxes. That's almost a 20%, 200%? Come on, you're the mathematician. 500% increase in just ad valorem taxes, to say nothing of the population and the taxes we get out of gas and everything else. I'm not into finances. I'm into planning, I'm into development, and hopefully we end up with a really good project. There's nothing that says this is going to be a success. I'd be the first one to tell you that. City Place failed, David, 3 times? At least 3 times? Quite frankly, I was involved in part of it. I hate saying that, but I was when it failed once or twice. I've been involved in Dayland with Fairfield Development. I'm not a public speaker, by the way, so if I seem a little nervous, I am. This opportunity here is phenomenal. There is no other place in the county where you have 2 major roads intersecting, bisecting a village, and being able to use it as an opportunity to do development. As a secondary road, and Joe can address this, Frangel Road is a feeder road. It has incredible potential, absolutely incredible. If you take the first 3 blocks, the 5-acre development, Miami's Children's Hospital, the 2 parcels that are to the other side, you're looking at $100 million worth of development. Taxes are, or more, we don't know right now. The financial and the actual impact on the community is incredible. Now, everybody says quality of life. To everybody, it means something different. I'll tell you what it means to me, okay? What it means to me as part of this task force is controlling and guiding commercial residential development, mixed-use development. One of the big issues has been all this development's going to spill into the village. We, as a task force, have gone out of our way to protect the neighborhoods. We have literally buffered it with linear parks, downtown parks, a step development from low scale, medium rise, to relatively 12-story buildings down the FT&I, which, by the way, they can build today. I want everybody to realize that. FT&I basically says you can build 8 to 10-story buildings. Nobody knows that. Why? Because FT&I has failed. Why has it failed? Ed touched upon it, they put it in the drawer and they walked away from it. It failed because of the old codes and the restrictions that were here. We have a new way of looking at things, and hopefully everybody will come around to this point of view, is that we have assets. We need to develop the assets together. As such, we have what we're going to call an FFIC, Freeform Incentive Code. I want something from the developer wants something from me. I'm speaking as a government entity, which I'm not. But for instance, we want linear parks. We will tell a developer, or ask a developer, or request from a developer, however you want to put it, we want 20 feet of your property. He's going to yell and scream, you just took $1 million out of my property. David will tell you it's probably more. Bottom line is, ROI, return on investments, instead of 5 stories, maybe we give them 6 stories. Maybe we give them 7, okay? Depending upon the location. But what it's called is working together
to make something come true and actually come up with a functioning, livable downtown. And we think we've started the process correctly. I hope I've answered your question. They are definitely behind this. They see the benefits from it all the way around. Now, can't speak for future councils, but I can tell you what's there right now.
Any other questions? And with that, I want to say a couple other things. This is a giant jigsaw puzzle. There's a lot of little pieces and a lot of little components that goes in to doing this right. We're not going to get them all right, but we're going to keep trying and keep trying and be diligent at it. Even with the city place that had difficulties a couple of times, even from the very beginning, it did bring in the tax revenues to the city of Palm Beach that it needed to survive. That never went away. What happened was that the developer usually what happened, the developer had the issues, the financial issues. But in reality, this is about quality of our lives. We need to have a place to go. We need to have our own vertical shopping centers to go and not have to go to Alton Road, out on the beach. We need to have a place where we can go and have dinner other than the Golden Rule on US 1. We need to have places that we can go and have dinners and be a community and have a place that we can gather other than the Coral Reef Park once a year when we have our picnic. It would be nice to be able to go out to dinner and run into our neighbors. That's what we're trying to do and we're trying to achieve. A byproduct of this is financial security for our village. And I want to touch on one last thing about what Stanley just said. This whole council has endorsed this project. They've endorsed it in video. They've endorsed it by having a vote through the budgetary process. They've endorsed it by being very enthusiastic about it, and we hope that we continue to get their backing all the way through this project. But for that to happen, I have to have the backing of all the village and all the residents, as many as we possibly can. And with that, I'm going to ask a question. How many of you all think that this is a worthwhile endeavor? I'd like to know that by a show of hands. With that, if there's any other questions?
And you might mention your petition.
Oh, I do have a petition that if you haven't signed it, I would appreciate for you to sign it. It's basically to acknowledge that you endorse the future of Palmetto Bay and the growth of our downtown. And with that, I want to thank you for your time.
I'm going to take 30 seconds, because Ed is a heads-down kind of guy. I am on the task force. I'm part of the marketing effort that we're going to be continuing to push out to all the residents to make sure they hear everything, all sides of what this is going to be. But you can see tonight, we have a nucleus, a very small nucleus of a snowball effect. If you like this idea, you owe it to yourself and your fellow residents in Palmetto Bay to start talking about it, even if it's up over coffee for 10 seconds, because this room isn't full enough. We have to have all the ears and eyes of everybody in Palmetto Bay. I will continue to effort to do that, but each of us has our little part that we can do. So please, when you leave here, if you don't sign the sign up over there, at least go talk to your neighbors, because it's incredibly important, and as long as we have your support, this small nucleus, we can grow it to the entire village very quickly.
I'm sorry, there's one other thing I do want to point out, and we've had some comments about our model, okay? That model is so outdated, it's pathetic. It's only 2 months old, and it's outdated. Why? When we have our task force meetings, we have people come in, and they have big recommendations. And believe it or not, Ed, Mr. Pearson, where are you? Where'd he go? Did he leave? Oh, damn. Have listened to everybody, and we want everybody's input. They made some major suggestions in regard to linear parks, how we buffer things, the size of buildings, all of which have been taken into effect. And we're actually going to come up, we hope, with a current model that we can change depending upon what everybody's input is. But please understand that that model, other than the roads, which are locked in, is subject to change and all your input. I mean, we're not here doing this in a vacuum. I hope you understand all that. Thank you.